Hello students, in this video we're going to talk about carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are made out of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the ratio of the three elements is 1:2:1 ratio. So a carbohydrate can either be a carbon chain or a carbon ring. So this picture you see over here is a carbon ring. Each one of these corners is a carbon. And then we have something called a monosaccharide, a disaccharide, or a polysaccharide. So a monosaccharide is just the monomer of carbohydrate. So anytime you have a monomer for carbohydrate, you call it a monosaccharide. That is one single carbon ring or is one single carbon chain. A disaccharide is called a dimer. So that is when you put two monosaccharides together. They're linked in the middle with a covalent bond, and that's a disaccharide. There are two examples of disaccharides over here. We have lactose and sucrose. Polysaccharides is when you have more than two carbohydrates, monomers linked together. So if you have a lot of monomers being linked together, you will call that a polysaccharide. So these are some examples of polysaccharides. Cellulose, made up of the plant cell wall. Starch is stored in plants, but we also eat starch ourselves as human. Glycogen is how sugar is stored in our body. We'll take a look at the pictures of that later on. And then we have chitin, which is the exoskeleton, or so the hard skeleton of insects, has chitin in it. And then fungi's cell wall is also made out of chitin. Sorry, the dog is distracting me. Okay, so some functions of carbohydrate. You might already know that carbohydrate is for storage of energy, and is usually a short-term storage of energy. And you can eat carbohydrate from all kinds of food, right? So you get that from your food, but then you also can convert carbohydrates into other material in your body. The dog is going crazy. Other ways that carbohydrates can be useful, right? We said it can be a part of cell wall, so it strengthens the plant cell wall. It is a main component of the plant cell wall. And then we have over here this exoskeleton of insects, and then we have fungal cell wall as well. All right, so let's take a look at the next slide, Carbohydrate Basics. We have some monosaccharides, glucose, fructose, galactose. Those are not the only ones, but these are three that are that we see a good amount. You might notice that all three of these types of sugars, as well as the sugar that we saw on the previous page, all end with three letters, OSE. So that is one way that you can tell that it's a sugar or it's a carbohydrate. Okay. The chemical formula again is carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, 1:2:1 ratio. Moving on. All right. So function of carbohydrate again is for we use it a lot for cellular works. So carbohydrates produce energy. In the future, we're going to talk about cellular respiration, and when we break down sugar, it's going to produce something called ATP in our body. So ATP is a usable form of energy, and sugar is what we intake into our body, and we convert energy in the sugar into another form of energy, which is ATP, which is a little more useful in our bodies. Again, this is a short-term storage of energy, and then we can also use it as a building material for cells. Moving on. Carbohydrate polymers. So right here we have a disaccharide, and there's a bond in between these two monosaccharides, and we call that a glycosidic linkage or a glycosidic bond. It's a type of covalent bond, but it's specifically found in carbohydrates. So we have disaccharides, we have polysaccharides, and we have glycosidic linkage. All right, examples of carbohydrate. This first one is starch. So as you can see, this is a very complex form of carbohydrate, which is why we call carbohydrates macromolecules. We can have a ton of glucose molecules being linked together in a certain way to form starch. You can get starch from plants, but you can get starch in all kinds of things, right? But you can get starch from the food that you eat from plants. Function in this case is for energy. You can notice that there are branches coming off as well. So we have carbon ring, we have branched off carbohydrates, and we have carbon links as well for carbohydrates. Another example is called glycogen. So glycogen is how we store sugar in our body. So on the left side, you can see we have insulin and glucagon. So those are hormones that allows our body to store those sugars. So insulin will convert glucose into glycogen to store in our liver, and then glucagon is what releases that sugar into our body when we need it. Okay, so on the right side, you see this little line over here, that's homeostasis. So homeostasis is a constant environment, a stable environment that you want to maintain for a lot of cases, right? For our body, we want to maintain our body temperature, your blood sugar, your blood pressure, the amount of water in your body. All those are maintained in your body at a certain level, so we call that homeostasis. When you eat food, this homeostasis is going to be disrupted, right? So when you eat a lot of food, that is more input of carbohydrate in your body. So now we would have a rising blood sugar. So how does your body respond to it? Your body will then release insulin, and this hormone will allow your liver to store away the glucose in the form of glycogen. And then glucose uptake by cells increase as well, so your cells can absorb the glucose and then use it directly. And then the result of that is that your blood sugar now goes down, right? So the cause is the blood sugar goes up, we release insulin, use the glucose, we store away the glucose, now your blood sugar is down. Now we go back to the homeostasis. Opposite of that, if you haven't eaten for hours, right? Let's say you're sleeping for 9 hours on a Friday night because you're so tired from all the studying that you did all week, then your blood sugar will go down, all right? But your body still needs sugar, right? Your body needs that sugar to be able to function because all the cells need ATP, that energy, in order to function. So what happens? We have falling blood sugar over here as a result of you not eating for a while, probably. And then what happens after that is your pancreas will release another type of hormone called glucagon. So glucagon, don't get it confused with glycogen. So glycogen is a type of carbohydrate that we store in our body, but glucagon is a hormone, right here, that allows our liver to break down the glycogen and release more glucose into the bloodstream. So the result of that is our blood sugar will rise and go back to the homeostasis again. So this is a graph that you're going to be seeing a few more times this year, and you want to make sure that you understand how this works. We have a stimulus that disrupts the homeostasis, and then your body will then respond and return to homeostasis. Moving on from here, we have another type of carbohydrate called cellulose. So cellulose is also very complex. It is a macromolecule. It's a polysaccharide, okay? So this is made up of it makes up cell wall. And it's a very strong structure, right? When you look at leaves, it doesn't look very strong, but they're pretty strong, right? If you think about plants, they're really holding up their entire structure together using things such as cellulose. Okay, so the cell wall, you all know cells have cell membrane. Plants also have cell wall outside of the cell membrane. So that's what cellulose does. And then another word on cellulose is that cellulose cannot be directly digested by us, which is why a lot of times we say, oh, we got to eat fiber, right? It's good for our digestion. But we can't actually digest the fiber. The fiber is good for our digestion, but we can't actually break down these plant fiber. We can't actually break down the cellulose. But it's still good for us. However, cellulose can be broken down by herbivores. So they have bacteria in their stomach that are in charge of breaking down the cellulose and then use that as a form of energy, which is why herbivores are fine just eating plants, right? They might get a little hungry. I don't really know. I haven't asked them, but they eat plants and they're fine with it. All right. The next one is chitin. These are all kinds of animals that have chitin as their exoskeleton structure, a component of their exoskeleton. So there's a word exoskeleton, that just means the outside skeleton instead of our regular skeleton, which is inside our body. And then chitin is also a part of the cell wall for fungi. This last page is an example showing you starch versus cellulose. They're both made out of glucose, but how the glucose is linked together is what determines whether it's starch or it's cellulose. Okay, so if you can think about it, you have two hands, right? Your hand can go facing up or facing down. You can put two hands together next to each other and holding my computer. You can put two hands together right next to each other, both facing up, or you can do one hand up and one hand down. So that's kind of how it is. With starch, all the hands are facing up, right? You see the OH pointing, they're all pointing down. They're all pointing under the ring. And then cellulose is kind of like a flip-flop situation, all right? And then lastly, this is our CED. So this outlines what exactly you should have taken away from this video. I need you to know more than just this outline, but you can take a look at this, all right? So you should know the carbohydrates monomers, the properties of carbohydrates, how the carbohydrate functions. You also need to think about carbohydrate being linear or branched, right? Think about the starch. There are a lot of branches over here. And then you can also have linear chains of sugar, okay? That's all we have for carbohydrates. I hope you learned a lot from this video.